Do you remember the coachloads of supposed child migrants coming into Britain in 2016, and everybody was saying, they're not kids, they clearly look like adults, because they have beards and flipping stubble and all kinds, and they were like 6 foot, 7 foot tall. Anyway, this is an article, and another all-male coachload of child migrants arrives in Britain, but officials won't say how many there are and won't do dental checks to prove they're really children. Third wave of child migrants arrives in Britain from Calais jungle today. Do you remember that, folks? Yep. And all these were claiming they were 13, 14, 15. Well, and they wouldn't do dental checks neither, the government. Well, let's move on to the article that we're going to look at now. Across the screen, you will see images of those who were claiming to be child migrants in 2016, taken from the newspaper article, which I will link below. I think it was the Daily Express or Daily Mail, and they took lots of photos of these supposed children who the government wouldn't do dental record checks on, and who wouldn't check to see whether they were actually children. Clearly to us, they weren't children, and it's been proven also that many of them weren't children, and that was 2016, and 6 years later we have triple killer Lawangin Abdul Rahim Hassai jailed for life for murder of Thomas Roberts in e-scooter argument. Abraham, I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry, arrived in the UK after fleeing his home country of Afghanistan and Serbia, but his violent past went undetected. He even duped officials into believing he was 14 and was placed in foster care. Now we're going to see what happened in Serbia now. A triple killer who sought asylum seeker in the UK has been sentenced to life in prison for murdering a man during a dispute over an e-scooter. Now this thing, which is now 21, was found guilty earlier this week, and he murdered, cold blood, Thomas Roberts in Bournemouth. He'll serve a minimum of 29 years. First off, we'd rather have Thomas Roberts still alive, who's going to live a lot longer, was going to live a lot longer, in all likelihood, than 29 years. And now we have got to pay for the upkeep and the imprisonment of this lowlife in prison, who, we shall read on, murdered 2 people in Serbia and was still allowed into this country, yes, with an AK-47, shot them in cold blood, pumping multiple rounds into their bodies and into their heads before jailing Abdullah to life. Judge Paul Dugdale said, in seconds you took the life of a thoroughly decent man with a bright future who was loved greatly by so many people. It was not only this evil person that took this gentleman's life, it was the government of the day, and it was all those do-gooders who could clearly see that those coming in the main, or lots of them, were not children. And he goes on, this judge, to say, we all know what he did, etc. And we don't need the judge to tell us, and not only that, we don't need the judge to tell us, because I don't think he does, that the government are also, and also all the social services, they should have been raising these flags. They should have been saying, these are not children. They even sent them to schools with 15, 14, 13-year-old girls and boys. And in fact, this evil scumbag actually beat up a 15-year-old and tried to take this 15-year-old's girlfriend off him, but beat him up. Unbelievable. And still allowed to stay in the country. No questions asked. Unbelievable. This is where we're at, folks. Unbelievable. And then he buried the knife, burning the trousers jacket and an Afghan flag he was wearing as a scarf. So following the sentence, Detective Chief Inspector Simon Huxter of Dorset Police said Tommy's family and loved ones have suffered an unspeakable loss. I just can't read that, because these people are just as much to blame. These people should have been flagging these people up. They allowed them to go into the community. They allowed them into this country. Now, he claimed he fled his home country of Afghanistan after he was tortured by the Taliban and his parents were killed. I'm sorry, he was probably part of the Taliban. If you could pick up an AK-47 and put multiple rounds into 2 people and in their heads, you haven't just picked up that AK-47, you know how to use that AK-47, and with intent to kill and make sure that those person you shoot it into die. And it seems to me like he's been trained to basically slaughter people against the wall, pumping multiple rounds into them. A trial was held in his absence. This was after he killed those people in Serbia. A trial was held in his absence, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Obviously, he didn't serve the 20 years because he was allowed to escape. And then he arrived in the UK after leaving the country. But his violent past went undetected. And he even managed to dupe officials into believing he was 14, up to 6 years younger than his actual age. Yes! And they say to us, trust us. Trust us. We know what's best for you. We know, we're the experts. He was placed in foster care upon his arrival. And one of his guardians had previously spotted him carrying a knife. Unbelievable. The Home Office said it will investigate the red flags missed, oh my goodness me, and look at the full circumstances surrounding the case. Foreign national offenders who exploit our system and commit crimes here in the UK will face the full force. I'm sorry, but they shouldn't have been allowed in to commit the crimes. He'd already been accused and put on trial, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison in Serbia, but escaped and was allowed to come into this country. This is all bullshit, and it keeps happening, folks. It's not until you stand up, wake up, speak up, scream up, shout up, that anything will change. And even then, will it change? No, we will be called the haters, the racists, the scumbags, those who should be silenced, like we've been silenced, and we're going to keep getting silenced until all of you start waking up and protecting the children of this country and not letting adults from murderous regimes into this country to kill and abuse our children in the schools of all places and use knives on our streets. It's time you stood up and woke up and started to speak up.